Hi, I'm Heather McGowan. We're going to talk about how to manage fear and panic in times of uncertainty. Let's talk about some of the questions we're going to answer. How is learning how people actually die possibly going to make you feel better? What is the impact of media consumption on your mental fitness? And by the end of this video, you're going to get some tips for mastering your emotions and maintaining higher levels of mental fitness. Let's look at some of the factors that have driven up world uncertainty. We got the global financial crisis, the sovereign debt crisis. We got Brexit, which nobody saw coming. The Trump term one, nobody saw coming. COVID. Well, let's look at what's driving up uncertainty today. Look at that uncertainty arc. It's much higher than it was even in COVID. So we've got four factors driving it. Geopolitical conflicts all over the world. We got trade wars and tariffs. We've got disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence, and people don't know yet where that's going. And we've got contentious global politics. But I'm a belligerent optimist, so I want to tell you some information. I used to end my talks this way, and then I got a lot of pushback, and I now understand why. I say to folks that we've never had a time in human history that we've done more to improve the human condition. We've improved the human condition more in one lifetime, this one we're in, than in all of recorded history. We're actually safer now. So let's look at two dimensions of why we're safer. This visual might be particularly helpful. So if you look at violent crimes in the US per 10,000, we had a brief bump up in COVID, but now we're back down to the lowest levels in recorded history. Now, it might be different for you. It might be different in your neighborhood. It might be different in geographic region. That's fair. But this is looking globally across the US and across the world. So these are averages. And I understand it's different for the individual. Let's look at global homicides per 100,000, also at the lowest level. So I would use this in my talks, and then I'd get this pushback from people. And I thought maybe the pushback is because their individual experience was different. And then I saw this data. Also, this visual might be helpful. This visual is based on 2023. How do you think people die? So if you watch Fox News, the Washington Post, and New York Times, that's a spectrum, right and left, right? So it includes everybody. How do most people die? If you watch Fox News, for example, you would think 11% of people die from terrorism. You would think 52% of people die from homicides. If you get your news from Washington Post, you might say 12% of people die of terrorism. 46% of people die of homicides. If you get all your information from the New York Times, you might say, well, 18% of people die of terrorism. 42% of people die from homicides. Now let's look at the reality. Homicides are less than 1% of deaths in the US. Terrorism is 0.001%. Most of us die of boring stuff. Heart attacks, strokes, cancers, accidents. Those are the leading cause of death. So if you're seeing all that news and you're getting all that information, you might believe we live in a world that's less safe, because homicides and terrorism, since it's like out of your control, could happen to you. Reality is very little chance that you're either going to die in a terrorist accident or a homicide. Now let's look at the impact of media consumption on your mental fitness, particularly the impact of doom scrolling. So I'm originally from Boston. I was in Boston during the Boston Marathon bombing. And this particular study looked at the Boston Marathon bombing, Superstorm Sandy, and one other event. I can't remember which one it was. But if you were actually at the event, so if you were at the finish line, not including, I don't think it includes people who are catastrophically injured, but if you were at the event and you heard the bangs and you had the stress, versus if you just consumed 6 hours or more of media about it, you had a higher level of stress if you consumed 6 hours of media at it than you are actually at the event. That's the impact on your mental health. So when we're trying to manage fear and panic in times of uncertainty, it's important to look at those things like, how do people actually die? What are you thinking about what's happening? What media are you consuming? Because all of that is increasing your anxiety and your panic. So let's now talk about how you can manage your emotional state. Here are some tips to mastering your emotions. So Sven Hansen from the Resilience Institute in Australia says that if you can acknowledge your emotional state, you've got a 50% chance of controlling it, versus if you ignore it, you have a 4% chance. So Hansen has a process. He says, name it, claim it, reframe it. So how does that work? You have to name the emotion you're in. Let me give you an example. So you're at home at night and you get an email and it really annoys you. It makes you anxious. It makes you angry. You've had a couple glasses of wine. You decide to respond. That's poor emotional management. Chances are good they didn't need to hear from you then, and your response was probably not the same way you felt the next morning. So that's an example of name it, claim it, reframe it. So you name the emotion. Now, Atlas of the Heart book, I think, is one of her greatest contributions, because she helps us understand emotional literacy, which for the most part, we're emotionally literate. When she did her research, we could only name 3 emotions: mad, sad, or glad. She said there are 47 different emotions. So it's hard for us to name it. We're emotionally literate. So I highly recommend that work and other ones that can help you become more emotionally literate. So if you can understand the emotion you're having, say, okay, I'm feeling anxious, and I'm feeling anxious because, and pause. How am I going to claim control of it? How much do I need to respond right now? How much of this am I imagining? How much of this am I impacting? So name it, claim it, and then reframe it. When do I need to respond? That's his tip for handling emotional management, which I think is really great. Ethan Kross is another individual who's looked into emotional management because he's a business school professor and he's realized that your success is largely dependent on your ability to master your emotions. So he says, sensations first. So what is it that can take you out of that emotional state? For a lot of folks, it's music. He's found somebody who bakes bread, could be walking your dog, going for a swim, taking a shower, something that gives you that sensation that gets you out of the emotional moment you're in. And then when does it need your attention? Like that email doesn't usually need to happen at night. A lot of times your response does not need to be immediate. Take the time that you need and then reframe it and actively manage it. Now let me give you 5 tips to remember when you're thinking about how to manage panic and fear in times of uncertainty. So uncertainty is going to be a norm. We got to get more used to it. But here are 5 tips to think about that emotional management. First, name it. What is happening? Second, shrink time. Shrink that time horizon. The further out it is, the more abstract it is, the more overwhelming it becomes. What needs to happen when? Regulate yourself. Get good sleep. Eat well. Connect well to others. Connections and relationships will replenish our reserves. And then agency. What is in and out of your control? There's probably more in your control than you realize. And what's out of your control, you can't do anything about. And then finally, act. Where can you make progress? And more importantly, where have you made progress? Because a lot of times you may have done something, it didn't work, you learned something from it, and that in itself is progress. You feel more agency when you feel the progress that you made and the things that you've learned. I'm Heather McGowan. If this has been helpful for you, click the link below and watch the next video, which is which values relate to tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty avoidance. I'm Heather McGowan. Thanks.